Alexandra, it was you that mentioned the Olympics, and that's the obvious like equivalent that we draw on, especially as they're also based in Switzerland. Um,
Mhm.
and funnily enough, now headed by a woman. Um, and it seems to me very striking that the Olympics and the World Cup, the host cities and countries never put the question to their voters as to whether or not they're going to host it. And in fact, I recall I myself interviewed the Paris mayor before the Paris Olympics in 2024 and asked her why there had not been a referendum on hosting it when there's like referendums in Paris and all sorts of things. And she said, because they would have said no. That was sort of like a very honest answer, I thought. What what's the risk for these hosts and countries, putting their hands up to host these things? And is the, prestige, as Simon put it, the prestige of being a host of the Olympics or the World Cup kind of beginning to lose its shine?
Yeah, I think it certainly is. And we have seen democracies in particular being more responsive to the public in their bids. I mean, Canada considered bidding and then didn't. Norway pulled out at one point. We're seeing a bit of a race to the bottom where we're going to have fewer and fewer democracies involved and more autocracies who see it as a way to launder their reputation, as Simon intimates. And also can generate the money without any transparency, which is key. It's striking how little transparency there is around these events, even in democracies. A lot of the contracts have confidentiality provisions, but yes, the appetite for events where highways are shut down so that executives from the IOC or FIFA or wherever else can travel in motorcades, all of that is distasteful for a lot of countries, and the more publicity it gets, the less appetite there is for it. So we are seeing Saudi Arabia get the World Cup, and we're seeing Winter Olympics in Russia. I mean, more recently in Italy, which did a fine job with it. But there just isn't going to be the appetite for these as they become more expensive without increased transparency or accountability. I think the public appetite for this is really thinning quickly. And how sad is it going to be when the major international sports events are held in countries with just appalling records on human rights, and they're anti-democratic, and typically also places where women's rights are secondary. I'm an enormous fan. I love soccer. I love the Olympics. I go to all of the Olympics, the Winter Olympics. I'm Canadian after all, but it's not being the governance is not only not keeping pace with the amount of money and the interest in this, it's falling behind. And that seems like a train wreck to me. I'm not sure how we pull sports back out of this.
Um, just a quick note for those online on the Zoom, please write down your questions or raise your hand on the little icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll have about another 15 minutes, so we'd love to hear any questions that you might have. But meanwhile, and maybe I can turn to you, Miguel. What should we be looking for in this World Cup? I mean, obviously the games are going to be really exciting. I think all of us are big, soccer fans that are going to be tuning in. But what are some of the kind of undercurrents that we should be aware of?
So my initial reaction following the Alexander will be I will be looking forward to a Portuguese victory after all these discussions. But my passion for in the end I'll be looking at the matches. I'll try to forget the organization that is behind this and looking passionately at the matches, hoping for a Portuguese win. But I mean, I think that I very much agree with what Simon and Alexander said in terms of the future of these organizations. But I think there is an increasing tension that is emerging between the more they try to increase their revenues, the money that the pot of money that they generate, the more elitist they are becoming. And I mean, we're seeing this with the tickets of the World Cup now. We're seeing it with the fact that in several countries, I think it's the case of the UK, for example, the World Cup for the first time will not be broadcasted on open air TV. Uh, um, I mean, and there are several countries. In Portugal, there was a risk until recently that the no open air television will broadcast the games. What would have been, I mean, a first time, and this tells us of the extent to which there is an emerging tendency between the fact that these organizations are continuously working to maximize the way they monetize these events and the money they get out of them, and to continue to feed this machine of power that is supported by it. And on the other hand, the fact that this continues to be the people's sports. I always say football is the people's sports. FIFA is not the people's organization, and there is an increasing tension between the two. What will be the result of that? I don't know. My hope is that at a certain moment, public authorities will realize that there's something that they need to do, that they need to rein in, that they need to impose minimum standards, regulatory standards, governance standards on FIFA and its confederations. I mean, it's not easy for reasons that Simon described. FIFA has this very unique, I'm being ironic in here, approach to the principle of political neutrality, whereby they co-opt politicians, they nurture special relations with political actors, but at the same time, if any government or even a court of a state tries to regulate minimally their activity, they immediately consider that a violation of political neutrality on the part of that state and exclude their teams, their national teams, but also their club teams from their competitions. And no government wants to be responsible for that. And that makes it very difficult for individual governments. So I think only supranational, transnational organizations, that's why I've always put a lot of trust on the role that the European Union can have on this. The European Court of Justice has been the only judicial body that has effectively been able to regulate and impose some forms of regulation on FIFA. And the reason is simple. I always explain, at heart, I'm a EU lawyer, and I always explain it to my student as an example where the EU does not erode national sovereignty, but actually reinstates public sovereignty in an area where it has been lost. It's because they cannot, neither FIFA nor UEFA, cannot go and say, well, we exclude Portugal, Spain, France, England, Germany, Italy, France, Belgium, Netherlands from our competition. They cannot do that. So it's the only organization that is empowered to bring back some level of regulation over FIFA. So and UEFA. So my hope is that at a certain moment the European Union will wake up, its political authorities and the national governments in the European Union will finally stop being co-opted or captured by sports organizations, and will bring some minimum level of regulation, as the European Court of Justice has been demanding for a long time, actually.